What's up everybody, my name is the Holy Apple and welcome to a bracket fight. So just as a little bit of context, this is going off of the previous tier list video I made, so if you haven't checked that out, press the I button above. It will be a link straight to the tier list if you haven't seen it before. But just to give you a rundown, I'm taking all the weapons in B tier and above, and then I'm going to pit them against each other in a fight and to see which one comes out on top as the best exotic in Destiny. But just as a note, I have dropped a few already because I feel like they won't stand against other weapons as good in terms of a straight up against each other fight. So I've dropped Divinity to Osteo and Whisper of the Worm because these don't really hold up in a fight against other exotics. But let's go over the rules. So the way this is going to work is I'm breaking it down into 3 sets of criteria. First criteria is how they fare against each other in a straight PvP match. The second set of criteria will be how well it performs in a PvE environment. And the third set of criteria is how lightly they're going to be used. So without further ado, let's fill the empty spots and see what we get. So first matchup, we've got a bit of an interesting one. We have the Monarque versus Osteo Striga. Now, this is going to be an interesting one because Le Monarque, I don't think I need to say this, it will beat Osteo Striga in a PvP encounter, like no ways about it. You can zip in, get one shot off and then hide and the Osteo Striga is going to hit the wall, then you dip straight back out, get the second shot and they're dead. Whereas there's very few times that the Striga will prevail, so I'm happy to give the Le Monarque the first point for PvP encounters. Going into PvE encounters, however, it seems to pull this back because you're more likely to use the Osteo Striga because it's very good for general ad clear and at the same time it is good for dealing damage to bosses. So I'm very happy to give Osteo Striga the PvE point on this, so it's now 1-1. Now we're going to go over frequency and how well they're used, and I don't think I need to explain that the Osteo Striga is being used literally everywhere. So in terms of popularity and where Osteo Striga is being used, you'll see it across every single platform. So Osteo Striga, unfortunately, is going to beat Le Monarque in this case. Moving on to the next battle, we have Trinity Ghoul versus Izanagi's Burden. So this will be an interesting one because this will all come down to how well you can shoot a sniper rifle. Because if you can pop off an Izanagi headshot, that is pretty much one bang in anybody. But I'm going to be a bit more generous towards Trinity Ghoul here because let's face it, there's not a lot of players that can consistently hit headshots with Izanagis or any sniper rifle for that matter, unless you're using some questionable third-party applications. So I think I'm actually going to side with Trinity Ghoul on this one in terms of PvP encounters because I can see Trinity Ghoul being a lot more usable. Not to mention if it's specialist procced as well, it would do extra damage and it might even be a 1-hit KO as well. Going into PvE, however, it's going to be a complete 180. Izanagi is more likely to be used because Trinity Ghoul, while it is very good for ad clear, 90% of the time you would be picking up Izanagis for boss damage as it's one of the highest DPS weapons in the entire game. So I can see Izanagis winning in the PvE perspective, making this 1-1. The frequency on how they're used, however, is quite interesting because you will see a lot of Izanagis for boss damage, but Trinity Ghoul can also be utilised as an ad clear weapon. And not only that, you're going to see a lot more Trinity Ghoul in the PvP kind of element. So I'm going to award this one to Trinity Ghoul, just solely because I see a lot more Trinity Ghouls more than Izanagis, despite the fact that I do quite a bit of raids and endgame activities. So Trinity Ghoul will be going forward on this one. Oh, this is an interesting one. Ace of Spades versus Xenophage. So we're going to assume that Xenophage has ammo. So they've got the 2 shots ready to fire off. You've got the heavy ammo. It's fine. Xenophage will beat Ace of Spades like with a 2-tap. So in PvP, it's actually going to be Xenophage literally all the time, even though Ace of Spades is a very deadly hand cannon in the PvP element. So the first point is going to have to unfortunately go to Xenophage, just solely due to the fact it can 2-tap enemies, and it doesn't need headshots to actually do its max damage. Going into PvE, Xenophage is literally all over the place. It's a very, very good starting weapon for both ad clear and boss damage. For new players, it is fantastic to get early on because it will basically set you up for all the endgame activity early on. Ace of Spades isn't really used in PvE at all because there is a lot of legendary hand cannons that can fulfill the same role. So this is 2 points to Xenophage already. Now we're going for the third. Third point is frequency. So basically, again, I see Xenophage a lot more than I do with Ace of Spades. I know it's heavily used in PvP, but Xenophage is used in Gambit 90% of the time. It's used in endgame content. It's used just in general. So this is actually a full whitewash for Xenophage beating Ace of Spades on this one, I'm afraid. Now the Witherhoard versus Sleeper Simulant. This would be interesting. But again, we're basing this on the fact that you would have heavy ammo. So actually, the Sleeper Simulant would beat Witherhoard in a straight PvP battle, because the Sleeper Simulant shot would probably just one-shot a Guardian, whereas Witherhoard, even if it was a direct hit, it would still take time to do its damage, so Sleeper Simulant will win the PvP battle. In PvE content, this is a weird split, because both of these are very viable in PvE. and it depends on what they're being used for. You only ever use Sleeper Simulant for boss damage. Like, if you're using it for ad clear, I'm wondering what you're doing, because unless you have an abundance of heavy ammo to burn, there's no point using it on general red bars. There's no need. But Witherhoard is very good at ad clear, not to mention it also does tick damage. It's basically like a backup Anarchy in a way. So in reality, I actually see Witherhoard being a little bit better in this situation, because generally it's a lot more used in PvE, and it has a bit more of a purpose to be using it in PvE as opposed to Sleeper. Which brings the scores up to 1-1 for these two. Now, this is going to be the bit that's quite interesting, the frequency. Now, I will be completely honest, I love Witherhoard. I think it's a fantastic weapon, but I'm going to have to give this to Sleeper Simulant just because it is a staple when it comes to boss damage, and Witherhoard, while it is used quite a lot for ad clear, I see Sleeper Simulant literally everywhere when it comes to boss damage in raids, in PvEs, strike bosses, in nightfalls, anything PvE related. There's probably Sleeper Simulant lurking around somewhere. So with a heavy heart, I would love to send Witherhoard through, but Sleeper Simulant is going to win this one. Okay, I thought it was going to throw me onto the other side of the brackets, but apparently it's not. So we have Osteo Striga versus Trinity Ghoul, which is interesting in itself. And I've got to start off with the PvP encounter. So Trinity Ghoul would be Osteo Striga. Like, it's again with the Monarque a minute ago. Trinity Ghoul would just be it. But this time round, PvE wise, it's quite interesting because Trinity Ghoul is very good for ad clear, which conveniently is what Osteo Striga does. Now you could argue because Osteo Striga is the new gun, it is a lot more popular at the moment, but I'm still going to give the PvE encounter to Osteo Striga just because there's a lot more utility with it. So just as an example, you could be firing bow shot after bow shot and actually proccing Trinity Ghoul's ability, which makes it fire its chain lightning out and wipe out a bunch of ads. But in the same kind of respect, you fire enough Osteo Striga shots at an enemy, it'll burst into a pool of poison, and that will then spread to other ads, making a bigger ad clear effect. So I think Osteo Striga has Trinity Ghoul beaten in this case. And then we go for frequency, and I'm going to say this right now, I see far more Osteo Strigas anywhere than I do Trinity Ghouls. This does include PvP as well. That's mostly due to the fact of I see more Monarques than Trinity Ghouls, so I'm going to have to give this to Osteo Striga yet again. Now we're going against the Battle of the Heavies. This would be an interesting one to see. I've not seen a battle like this yet, actually, but I would love to see this in actual PvP combat. The Xenophage versus the Sleeper Simulant. Now, I can guess from damage alone that if it's going to take 2 Xenophage shots and only 1 Sleeper, Sleeper's winning the PvP encounter. So that's 1 point to Sleeper. Then comes the PvE. Now, again, Sleeper Simulant beats Xenophage outright because Sleeper Simulant will kick out far more damage than Xenophage does, even though Xenophage has the better ad clear potential. When you're picking a heavy weapon, let's face it, 90% of the time it's based on boss damage, not generally clearing ads. So that's 2-0 already for Sleeper Simulant. Going on to the third, which is frequency. That's a bit of an odd one because I see quite a few Xenophages and I see quite a few Sleeper Simulants. But I do think Sleeper Simulant does edge this out very closely because I see quite a few more Sleeper Simulants than I do compared to Xenophages, despite the fact that they're both quite viable weapons. So, Sleeper Simulant goes through. It's still not throwing me to the other side of the bracket, but now we have the Osteo Striga versus Sleeper Simulant. Now, again, this is an interesting one. So, in a straight up PvP battle, Sleeper Simulant wins. It's a one shot. You'll probably get off 2 shots with the Striga, and then the Sleeper Simulant will just annihilate you, if I'm being honest. Now it goes into PvE encounters, and I'm actually siding with the Striga on this one again, because the Sleeper Simulant will only ever be used in like boss fights, or when you need to do a lot of damage. It won't be used for ad clear, whereas the Striga can be used for both in a sense, because of the tick damage it kicks out from its poison pool. So that is going to chalk this up to 1-1. Now it goes to frequency used, and this is a tough one, because I see a lot of Strigas, I see a lot of Sleeper Simulants, but I think just due to the amount of utility on it, I will have to pick Osteo Striga. You can use it for boss damage, you can use it for ad clear, you can use it in PvP, well, more frequently than a Sleeper Simulant. It just says to me, just pick Osteo Striga because it's a lot better used. Now it's got me on the other side of the bracket, and we have 1K Voices versus Cloudstrike. Now, this is an interesting one. Go back to that case of if you're good with a sniper rifle, you can get a one-hit headshot straight off the bat. Cloudstrike is wiping 1K Voices out any day of the week. Like, you've got the charge time, you're not getting that out quick enough. And even if you were to somehow pop around the corner at the perfect time and get the laser beam off, the sniper will probably still get you before the explosion kicks off. So that's going to be 1-0 to Cloudstrike. Going into PvE content, however, this is quite an interesting one, because Cloudstrike is fairly used for ad clear, and it's also quite good for dealing damage to mages. whereas 1k voices can do ad clear for if you want overkill on ads, or if you want to wipe out a major very quickly, it's very good for that. It's also very good for boss damage as well. So I'm actually thinking 1k voices wins in the PvE element of this. In terms of frequency, I don't actually see a lot of people using Cloudstrike as much as I thought I would, because Cloudstrike is still a very powerful weapon in PvP and PvE as well. I just know that 1k voices is still a very viable power weapon, and it can be used for a range of different things inside of PvE, and God forbid if you take it into PvP, not many people are surviving. So I'm happy to give this one to 1k voices. Now then, the Lament versus the Lorentz driver. I love the Lament, I'm going to be honest, but I don't see it winning against the Lorentz driver, if I'm honest. Lorentz driver in a PvP combat, yeah, you're not getting close enough to use Lament, I'm going to be honest, so Lorentz wins on that half. PvE wise, I can see the Lament being quite good in general use, so ad clear, boss damage, major damage, doesn't matter. Lament's quite good to have as a sword for close combat, but when you're thinking like the Grandmasters and Master Nightfalls, it's a very big risk jumping up and close with the high level enemies that will basically kill you in 2 shots, so Lorentz driver will become more viable in that kind of situation. So I think based on the fact of that Lorentz is a lot safer to use and you can use it for any kind of damage in PvE, I'm going to have to give this to Lorentz as well, which means Lament's being knocked out. But just for the sake of it, frequency. I do see a lot of Laments around, I do see a few Lorentz drivers being used. I don't hear Lorentz as much as I used to, and I know Lament is still a very good weapon to be using, especially for solo players, so I'll actually give the frequency to Lament because I see it a lot more than I do with Lorentz, but Lorentz is still going through on this fight. Now then, the Deathbringer vs Thorn. This is a bit of a mismatch if I've ever seen one, but Deathbringer, let's just face it, in a PvP combat, if someone can get a Deathbringer on, regardless of the hand cannon, Deathbringer's winning the PvP encounter. PvE for Deathbringer, it's a very good weapon to use for ad clear, and at the same time it hits very hard on bosses. So again, this flawlessly beats Thorn in my eyes. I like using the Thorn hand cannon, but this just seems like a bit of a whitewash. But having said that, there is also the frequency coming into this as well. So Thorn I see used a lot more than Deathbringer. I would like to give Thorn the win, but I'm sorry, Deathbringer is a lot more viable. Now then, Gjallerhorn vs Outbreak Perfected. I would have loved to have seen Outbreak Perfected go through, but honestly, I don't see that happening. Gjallerhorn in a PvP encounter, I've seen it so many times. If someone gets hit with a Gjallerhorn, they're dead. If it doesn't hit them directly, the flailing mini rockets will hit them instead. So Gjallerhorn wins PvP encounter. PvE, again, Gjallerhorn, it wipes out ads, it does a lot of damage, it outright wins. Frequency, Gjallerhorn is everywhere. I don't see many Outbreak Perfected. Gjallerhorn wins by a landslide. Now then, we have 1k voices versus the Lorentz driver. I'm going to be honest, straight up PvP, Lorentz is winning, because you have to charge up 1k, whereas Lorentz, it has a charge up, but I'm pretty sure it's a little faster than 1k, and not to mention, it still takes a second before the explosion happens, but by that time, Lorentz has hit and killed whoever it's been shot at. Second element, which is PvE, I again think this is going to Lorentz, because Lorentz can be used for ad clear, whereas 1k you wouldn't use it as much for ad clear, even though you could, and it's quite good for ad clear. You can use Lorentz a lot better, and it has the pull as well, so you can drag in more enemies than 1k could probably kill. Not to mention the fact of Lorentz is a special weapon as opposed to 1k being a heavy weapon, so Lorentz ammo is a lot easier to come by as well, which makes it a good winner for PvE, especially in late PvE content. And then lastly, frequency. I don't see 1k being used as much anymore, but I do see quite a few Lorentz being used in PvP and PvE, so this is going to be a complete landslide for the Lorentz driver. Now then, Gjallerhorn vs Deathbringer, the battle of the rocket launchers. I have to say, in the PvP battle, Gjallerhorn is winning any day of the week. Whilst Deathbringer is very powerful, it does take a while for its missiles to actually reach where it needs to go, whereas Gjallerhorn is quite a bit quicker. Not to mention, when it does explode, the Deathbringer is still quite slow to track its targets, whereas Gjallerhorn is again faster with the mini rockets, so Gjallerhorn wins this outright. In terms of PvE, this is quite interesting because they both do effectively the same thing. They're both good for ad clear if you want to use it for ad clear. They're both very good at taking down mages, and they're both very good for damage. The only difference separating these two is that Deathbringer does more damage, so it is more viable for using against bosses. So Deathbringer actually wins the second round in PvE. In terms of frequency, however, this is a completely different story. Not many people use Deathbringer, which I'm quite surprised by considering it's one of the highest DPS rocket launchers, and a lot of people use Gjallerhorn. I'm assuming this is just because of the sheer utility of it, which means Gjallerhorn is going through on this round. Now then, we have the Lorentz driver versus the Gjallerhorn. So, in straight PvP, I'm comfortable to say Lorentz is winning this fight. That's because I'm under the impression that Lorentz is going to be a lot quicker to shoot, as in, it's nearly instantaneous when it hits, whereas Gjallerhorn does have some travel time, so I'm going to weigh it on that fact alone, that Lorentz will be beating this argument. So the PvP round will go to Lorentz. PvE, on the other hand, I think Gjallerhorn is a lot more viable, as it can be used for a lot of ad clear. It is very good for dealing damage with mages. It's very good for the boss damage. So the Gjallerhorn is going to win the PvE encounter. In terms of frequency, I'm going to say again, the Gjallerhorn is a lot more popular than the Lorentz driver, despite the fact that the Lorentz driver is still very powerful on its own. So Gjallerhorn is going through once again. Now then, the Clash of the Titans, the two most popular weapons in Destiny, Osteo Striga versus Gjallerhorn. Now then, in straight up PvP fights, I think we can all agree that Gjallerhorn is winning in a straight up fight. So Gjallerhorn is going through on the first point. In PvE, I'm sorry to say this, Gjallerhorn is beating Osteo Striga. It is just how it is. Gjallerhorn can wipe out ads a lot faster than Osteo can. It can take down mages a lot quicker than the Osteo can. It does a lot more damage to bosses than Osteo does. I can just see Gjallerhorn completely shelling out Osteo on this one. But I will say on frequency, weirdly enough, I do see more Strigas than I do Gjallerhorns. But this does unfortunately mean that Gjallerhorn wins 2-1. So Gjallerhorn, I am happy to say, has won the bracket fight. So just as a quick side, this is how the bracket fight played out. If you guys would like to do this yourself, I will leave a link down in the description for this bracket fight specifically. Obviously, you can make your own if you wish. It's on the site. You just sign up and then make it yourself like I have done here. But this is quite interesting to see looking at it like this. If you like the video, remember to leave a comment down below and also a like to support the channel. But this is me done. Thank you all for watching and I will see you all in the next video.